I ended up eating and not watching the third episode. But we're watching it now. I have so many questions. Like, as I was sitting, I wrote all these questions and comments about the episode after I watched it last time. I think the biggest one, I have a few things. I think Bernard is the one telling Dolores to wake up and who's giving her instructions. That would make sense since he's having so much contact with her, and obviously he's not supposed to be having that much contact with her. Also, when she's sitting with him, she has clothes on, and when he's with the other robots, he kind of just, like, they're all naked because they're in, like, the general pool area when they're being questioned and maintenance and all that. I feel like he's getting sympathy for them. And the fact that she has clothes on with him is a sign that he is seeing her as more human, even though he's not supposed to. I've also been informed, according to some people who shall remain nameless, that it is not politically correct to call them robots or AIs. They are androids. I'm kidding. Don't type and tell him how ridiculous that is. We were just talking about it, and I kept saying robots or whatever, and he was sitting there and he goes, they're androids. It was funny. So yeah, that's not it. I had a whole bunch. When Bernard was in bed with the chick, I can't remember what her name is, she said, you know, your androids, they're always talking to each other. They're never quiet. And he said when they are talking to each other, they're practicing. And she said, is that what you're doing right now, practicing? And he, like, smiled. Is he an android? Is he a robot? I kind of think he is. We're going to leave that on pause for now. Someone made a comment in the last section that they think that the little boy who said to Dolores, you're not real, like the little family that saw her painting by the river, they think that the little boy is Bernard. That's a really good theory too. I kind of think he's not real. What's his face? When after that asshole guy presented the new storyline that he was thinking of, and Ford, like, cut it down, like, no, this is ridiculous. He said, here every detail adds up to something. They come back because of the details and because they notice something they think no one else knows before. And then he said, they come back because of something they fall in love with. Is William going to fall in love with Dolores? I'm thinking so. I think, because we know these people have to have money to come here. I think he fell in love with Dolores. Something happened to make him pissed off at this world or whatever. I think he paid them to include his storyline in Teddy with Dolores, because she says to him, you came back. And that would be a great thing for him to feel like she remembers him. So I feel like he paid them to have Teddy, have them linked up and have his story with hers. You know what I mean? The way they first met. And I think he's trying to, I don't know what this maze is, but I think maybe it's a way for them to be free, because he's on a path to something. And if he fell in love with her, which is weird, maybe that's it. I feel like he paid to have Teddy's story. I feel like he paid to have his first encounter with her as part of the permanent loop through Teddy. And that's why those two are connected. What is special about the place where Ford had that boy standing there, like, kind of waiting for him to come, and then they walked towards the area where he wants to build a new site together? Like, what is the significance of that boy? I wonder if he was, like, a replica of Ford's kids or something like that. I don't know. Oh, someone had to have planted that picture and that gun. Who the heck was that? I'm thinking Bernard. Also, I think that the man in black said he was born here. I think that is also why he paid to have his storyline, like his first encounters, put into Teddy, with him getting off the train and bumping into the guy, with him seeing Dolores and picking up the can for her. I'm totally thinking this is a 2-timeline story. Who knows? By the end of it may be 3 or 4. So, all right, let's go ahead and watch the next episode.
Try this passage. Dear, dear. How queer everything is today. And yesterday things went on just as usual. I wonder if I've been changed in the night.
Does that passage make you think of anything?
And it's like the other books we've read.
How so?
It's about change. Your son. Where is he now?
Nowhere that you would understand, Dolores. Perhaps that's why I enjoy our conversations so much. Analysis. Why did you ask me about my son?
We've been talking for some duration, and I haven't asked you a personal question. Personal questions are an ingratiating scheme.
I see. Do you remember?
Why don't we reacquaint ourselves, Dolores? Start at the beginning.
You're juicy as a freshwater clam.
Yay.
Actually, I have something different in mind.
What?
I'm waiting for the good stuff. This bounty's JV shit. Let's stay here. I want a little adventure.
Don't mind me. Just trying to look chivalrous.
Came back.
I told you I would.
Teddy, a small part of my new narrative. A fiction which, like all great stories, is rooted in truth.
You look upon the face of true evil, you ain't liable to forget. You claimed you could hear the voice of God. Started down near Escalante. Now squeeze.
I can't. Who is he, Teddy?
You'd be better asking what than who, ma'am. Wyatt's a pestilence. Word is, Flood here's the only man ever come up against and lived to tell the tale.
I like this music.
Any moment, Sheriff.
It's weird.
Looks like Australia has a hobby. Another one of you fucking backstories.
Backstories do more than amuse guests. They anchor the host. It's their cornerstone. The rest of their identity is built around it, layer by layer. Come again?
Markings on show. Like stars. Orion, right?
What are you, Gala-fucking-Leo?
Doesn't get cold. Doesn't feel ashamed. Doesn't feel a solitary thing that we haven't told it to. Understand? But Arnold hadn't considered two things. One, that in this place, the last thing you want the hostess to be is conscious. And two, the other group who considered their thoughts to be the voices of the gods. He saw something that wasn't there. We called it an accident, but I knew Arnold. He was very, very careful. Well, forgive me, but I know that the death of your son, Charlie, still weighs heavily on you.
I suppose I'm glad for you. At
Firefly.
least you have a way of forgetting.
I need to decide what to do with you. I think I made a mistake. I was just fascinated. I was being selfish, but I think it would be better if I restored you to the way you were before.
Some people choose to see the ugliness in this world.
Stop. Lose all scripted responses. Improvisation only.
All right. You're saying I've changed?
Imagine there are two versions of yourself.
There aren't two versions of me. There's only one. And I think when I discover who I am, I'll be free.
Analysis. What prompted that response?
I don't know.
Evolution forged the entirety of sentient life on this planet using only one tool.
Mistakes.
Mistake.
Ford said that in the last episode.
Here's you're in good company.
Do you still want to change me back?
No, Dolores. Let's see where this path leads, and you'll stay on your loop.
Yes.
Lies. He didn't put her back on scripted. She's still on improv.
Father wouldn't let him roam this close. It's dark.
Deja vu.
Got any use for this one?
No, thanks.
No one here to interrupt us this time.
Interrupt this time.
She took his gun.
Why don't we reacquaint ourselves, Dolores? Start at the beginning.
They're flashing back and forth again.
Kill him.
Get back here. Hey! Get back here.
She's remembering being shot before. So that was present. She was remembering a past time when she got shot.
Can you put him in sleep mode for me, please?
Sleep mode don't work. Sleep mode doesn't work.
Stop!
Told ya. Oh, you're dead. They can't kill people though. Can they destroy themselves if they're gonna hurt a person? This is a pass. This is William. Okay, I need to check 2 things before I start talking. Oh, okay. That was an awesome episode, first of all. Okay, I have 3 pages of notes. This is the most, look at this. I have the front, the back, and the next page. Dang. Okay. Let's start at the beginning. Bernard gives Dolores a gift, the Alice in Wonderland book. She reads a passage, how queer everything is today, and then later on, I feel as if I've been changed in the night. And then she says, if I'm not the same, the next question is, who in the world am I? I think this is going to come in a lot later on, because later on Bernard left her in improv mode. He didn't put her back into scripted. He said, remove all scripted responses, improv only. There's so much. Okay, the next scene, Dolores sees the gun. They flip back and forth a lot in this episode. So Dolores sees the gun and we're in the present. And she has like the flashback. And then she's looking in the mirror, just like with last time when she was looking in the window and she flipped to Bernard. She has these moments when they focus on her face, they're flipping back and forth a lot. So she sees the gun, she looks up in the mirror, and then she has a flashback and she does that whoosh thing kind of, and she looks down, the gun's gone, she puts everything back in the drawer and she keeps going with her day. In the I just noticed that in the past we haven't seen Maeve yet, and I think that's what they said, like when they took Maeve out to be decommissioned and they ended up keeping her in last episode, the guy said Clementine's done her job before. So apparently in this timeline Clementine is the head person, and then later on they added Maeve. So maybe in this timeline Maeve is the mom off in the cabin with the little girl, and she gets attacked by whatever those things were. They looked eerily, I'm jumping around, but they looked a lot like the bad guys at the end who killed Teddy, like with the mask and the head thing on. Keep that in mind, we'll get there in a second. like keep that in mind. We have the scene with the guy who was captured and he was supposed to be turned in for a bounty or whatever. He busts out of the window and Will kills him, and Clementine comes onto him and he says no, and then I guess he feels so alive he wants to go do like another like hunt thing, and Will's brother-in-law says, this is this is stupid, I'm waiting for the good stuff. And Teddy says he wants a little adventure. I feel like this is the moment when he finally started to embrace this, like, I'm gonna go on an adventure. And the fact that the brother, who is all in black by the way, says that he's waiting for the good stuff, maybe that sits with him for a while and eventually encroaches on his mind. So now he is like in the future, in our timeline, he is doing the good stuff. He's doing like the ultimate hunt in this world. And like Ford said in last episode, every detail is important. There's something in this world you will fall in love with. Like, he is on the ultimate hunt right now. Ford is making a new storyline. He's throwing everything out of whack, so it's hard for them to keep track of who's doing what. We learned that the guy from the last episode who killed all those, the host from the last episode who was killing all the other hosts, he was talking to someone named Arnold, and we find out that Arnold was Ford's former partner who died in the maze. Later on, Ford says he thinks that, pretty much that he thinks Arnold committed suicide because he was very, very careful. He was always very careful with what he did or whatever. So Arnold committed suicide in the park. I got everything. It's like a big circle. We cut again to like, there's so much to connect in this episode. This is a crazy episode. We cut again to the two park people hunting down this one stray guy, and the people here with were in the loop. They couldn't eat anything because he was the one that couldn't do that to work the axe. That was so funny. They go into his tent, and this is probably not important at all. It's probably not important at all, but like we just said, all the details are important. There were flies in his tent. We don't see very many flies in this world unless something's dead. We don't see flies here. but there were flies in his tent over where all of his little carvings were. And in the last episode, when they were cleaning up Maeve before she woke up, he said, the bastards are not cleaning up. No wonder we have a fly problem. Is that kind of like a little piece of symbolism that they haven't cleaned up this one stray that he's been kind of woken up and he's gone off to do his own thing because they haven't cleaned up what's wrong in his code? I feel like it is. It could be. I'm just saying, there were flies in that tent for no reason. I mean, if they were just shooting the scene, they could have gotten them out of there. But there were a couple in there, like 2 or 3. So I'll just let that one lie. We had this scene with Danny and Teddy. Not Danny. We have the scene with Dolores and Teddy where they're talking and Dolores is like, let's get out of here. And Teddy says, someday we can do that. And that kind of pissed her off. She's like, someday is a word people use when they mean never. And so that, like, when he says, someday I'll come back for you or whatever, and she has this look like someday means never. I guess she gets kind of an inkling. I'm jumping around a lot and I'm very sorry. We cut to Teddy sitting with Ford and Ford gives him his backstory. And he said something. He said, we find out that Teddy is the way to Dolores, like we kind of knew that already. But he said something like a good story like all others is rooted in truth. I've said already that his beginning storyline with him getting off the train, bumping into the guy, picking up the can and handing it to Dolores, we know that's rooted in truth because William did that his first time off the train when he visited the park. So is this storyline that he gave him with Wyatt, is that rooted in truth? Because he said Wyatt claimed to hear the voice of God. Number one, we know Ford is building a new attraction. The last episode when he was with that little boy, he said, can't you hear the bells on a white church with bells or something like that? So this Wyatt guy is claiming to hear the voice of God and he's building this attraction with a church that's going to be connected. But then later on in the episode again, when Bernard was talking to Ford about Arnold, how he died in the park, he said something about they were talking about the levels that they had to build into the androids. They had memory, improvisation, self-interest, and then something else that they hadn't defined yet. And he said they had installed in them their story would be told over and over in them until eventually they took on that story and it would be their voice instead. But he said some of them, they fear that some of them would think that voice was the voice of God. So, is that what happened? Because we have the scene with Maeve, her past, when she was taken, they were trying to scalp her and she ran to the house with her daughter. Those images of those things looked a lot like the new beings that, beat up Teddy. So in the past, before Arnold died, was he trying to give them some kind of consciousness and it didn't work out correctly and maybe they thought that voice was the voice of God and they were kind of had like a little rebellion? I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there. And now Ford is using that to make a new story, the one where Teddy gets captured or hurt or whatever. Because those two creatures, the creatures in Maeve's flashback and the ones now that got Teddy, they looked a lot alike. So I'm thinking some of the old androids thought it was the voice of God and kind of had like a conscious awakening and went rogue, and now Ford is using that as inspiration for this new story. The one I'm thinking that the Man in Black is following. So that's one thing. I know, I think too much and I'm probably linking things together that don't make sense, but there's so much. Teddy teaches Dolores to shoot. Now, this will go back to her final scene. He teaches her to shoot in this timeline and she tries to shoot the gun but she can't. And he says, some people aren't made to pull the trigger, blah, 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 whatever. The sound that this is, I'm just collecting dots, trying to. When Maeve had her flashback before of Teddy being in the real life room where they're cleaning up people, she had this sound in her head, and it's the same one that Dolores has in this scene. It's kind of like a, like, as it's hard to explain. Like, they have a definite, like, what the fuck music, where they're trying to figure out something, or something isn't going like the way it's supposed to, and they're confused about something. They have a confused music, is what I'm saying. And Dolores had it there because she's like, I'm trying to shoot this gun. Why can't I shoot it? And that's when the bounty people came up and said someday soon. We learned, at least I learned, I hadn't heard his last name before. Teddy's last name is Flood. And when they were talking about Wyatt, this music starts to play. It has this like dum dum, and they played it again when he was actually like on the trail looking for him. Is that Teddy's music, or is that just like looking for Wyatt music? I don't know what it is, but I love that music. It's great. So they go on the little adventure, or so they go on this quest to find Wyatt. And again, Teddy says Wyatt thought the land belonged to something that hadn't come. He thought it belonged to him. And then he says later on, he isn't man or devil, he's something else. I'm really thinking that this Wyatt person was based on something that happened in the past, where the androids started to become awake and thought they were hearing the voice of God telling them what to do. And now that's what this new attraction is based on. The Stray had Orion on his stone. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see what else. Ford, okay, the scene where Bernard goes to find Ford, and there's a man there working on another creation, and he's covered up, and Ford kind of goes apeshit over the fact that he's covered up. And he says later on, the last thing we want is for these hosts to be conscious. But he also gets mad at the thought of someone else thinking of them as human. Because he says to Bernard later on in their conversation, don't forget the hosts are not real. Like, he keeps saying that, and he gets mad when that guy has him covered up. And I think it's because Arnold forgot that the hosts were real, because he said later on Arnold liked to spend more time with the host than he did with regular people. Arnold obviously grew connected to them and started to think they're real, and I guess he wanted to help them, especially if they had some kind of like awakening before. He would want to help them. I'm wondering, okay, that's just stupid. I'll say it anyway. This entire thing is theories and dumb, so I'm just going to throw out the worst one ever. I'm wondering if Arnold found some way to upload his consciousness into one of these androids or into their programming somehow, and he's the one controlling some of these, like the corrupted line, and I wonder if he's the one doing that. The conversation between Bernard and Ford ends when Ford says to him, I know the death of your son, it weighs heavily on you. I felt like he was reminding him that, of just to be like, listen, you're going crazy, don't do anything rash, and don't trust yourself right now because you are not yourself. When we see him talking to his wife, it feels like he's been there for a while. I mean, grief has no time limit, obviously, but it feels like he's been there for a while, and he's sleeping with someone else now. Cheater. I just realized that. He's sleeping with what's-her-face, but he's married. That ain't cool. Again, this is just another theory. I have like 8 theories. If Bernard is an artificial intelligence, if he is an android, giving him a backstory is very, very smart. It keeps, because the chick, I can't remember what her name is, when she was in the tent, she said backstory isn't something just for the guests. It keeps them rooted in their storyline. The fact that Bernard we've seen his backstory, keeps him rooted in what he's doing, but he's still sleeping with somebody else. You know what I mean? I feel like he's kind of more, if he is an android, he's more conscious than the other ones, and he's starting to wake up a little bit, and maybe that's why he feels so connected to Dolores. But another thing is, because all the details are important, the fact that she said it does more than keep the guests entertained, or it's more than what draws the guests in, makes me think they gave Arnold a backstory so we would feel drawn to him, so we fall in love with him, so we root for him, and it keeps us wanting to see what his path is. You know what I mean? Like, this could be a total mindfuck. I feel like they gave him a backstory for us, so that if they do reveal he is an android, we're like, oh, we've been sucked into this world. I'm just saying. Okay, so the stray that was lost in the cavern, I was checking. The stray that's lost down in the cavern, the guy goes down, he tries to cut off his head, and he wakes up because sleep mode is not working. Someone needs to put a memo out to them that sleep mode is not working for these things. He climbs up, he raises a rock. I really thought that girl was dead, but they aren't allowed to kill humans or to kill living beings. Why would he kill himself? Well, not kill himself. Why would he self-destruct? That doesn't make... Did he do that because he felt compelled to kill her, and so that's like a protective mode? Like if for some reason they feel like they can do that, then maybe they self-destruct? Did something tell him to do that to cover up what he was doing? Because we know he's not on his loop. He's gone completely off what he was supposed to do. The poor guys that are waiting for him were supposed to be back in town for a cattle drive 2 days ago. So we know he's completely off script. Maybe that was to cover up what he was doing out there. Teddy lost against Wyatt's men. Duh. We know that's going to happen. I still feel like there maybe are 2 copies of each host, because Bernard has so much time to spend with Dolores. I don't see how she's making it back and forth all the time, because the guests had to take a train into the park. I mean, there could be an underground tunnel or something, but it seemed like it was very far away. So how is she making it back and forth all the time? I feel like she's using one to communicate with, and then it's like sending the message to the new one. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Bernard, in their final conversation, he said he thinks he made a mistake with Dolores. And he says, what if there were 2 versions of you? And he goes into this long thing. And she says, there aren't 2 versions of me. When I discover who I am, I'll be free. And he's like, okay, let's do this. And then he left her in improv mode. I don't know if that was intentional or if it was an accident that he just forgot to put her back unscripted. Because when she goes back to the apartment, okay, not the apartment, when she goes back to the house, let's talk about that scene. Okay, they were definitely flipping between 2, possibly 3 timelines here. I feel like they were flipping between 2 timelines, and they threw in, okay, here's what. So Dolores goes home, and she rides up, and she gets deja vu. She says, you know, Daddy wouldn't let them keep them out this long, whatever, and she stops. Like, she's obviously remembering things. She's on the present timeline. She rides up to the house. The guy grabs her. She looks down at her dad, and it flashes. She's on improv mode. She's starting to remember the things that have happened before. She gets dragged into the barn. This is when they flash. Just like at the beginning where she looked up and they kind of flash between scenes and she looks back down. She's thrown into the hay. She manages to get the gun away from the guy's holster and points it at him. And when she's pointing it at him, I feel like they flipped back and forth between present and the future. Maybe in the future, or present in the past, sorry. I feel like they flipped back and forth between the present and the past. So in the past, she has this gun in her hand, and in the present, the man in black is in front of her, and it's helping her to remember what she did, like that she had the gun and she shot. Because you have to remember earlier in the day, Teddy was teaching her how to shoot in the present timeline, and she couldn't pull the trigger. But obviously, in this past, she could pull the trigger and shoot somebody. So I feel like the man in black triggered her to remember, oh yeah, I did shoot somebody once before. So it was a double thing that was going on. It was in, you know what I mean? Like, it was in the barn. She was in the past. She had this gun in her hand, and then they flipped to the present to the man in black triggering her because she's on improv in the future to remember that she had shot somebody in the past before. So she shoots the guy. She's all shocked. She runs out. And she sees the guy on the porch, and he yells at her. And then she remembers, like, I guess if she, like, once she shot him in the past, she was probably shot in the stomach. And then she looks up again in the present and was like, oh shit, I'm going to get shot. I need to get the hell out of here. So she gets on the horse and she rides away. Now, her getting shot in the stomach, I don't know if that's actually, I feel like that was just her having a memory of being shot before in general. I don't feel like that was her being shot in the past, right after she shot the other android guy. Because in the present, she has that flashback, she rides off, but then we see her get on a horse and she rides off. We see her stumbling and she runs into William. But she doesn't have a bullet wound. I'm sure they would have said something about her having a bullet wound. Now, the fact that she got off her loop in the past after shooting the android guy in the barn, that's weird, because we don't know of her ever leaving the barn, ever leaving her farm before. So why would she leave and go to William? That's not part of her script. So if we're asking ourselves why, we have to hear right before she showed up to their camp, Will's brother-in-law says to him, this sucks. He's complaining. He's like, I spent $40,000 a day and I'm not even having fun right now. Like, he's all pissed because he's $40,000 a day. That, like, he's all pissed because, he's not having sex or he's not killing anything right now. So I feel like we know that they're watching the guests and they want to make sure they have their money's worth. Will so far has not partaken in anything except for the one time he shot the guy. We know he didn't sleep with the hooker. He's kind of moping around, not really knowing what to do until that morning when he shot the guy who had taken that same hooker that he had spent the night with before, but he still didn't go off and sleep with her. And we know that the park wants him to have fun. I feel like they made Dolores get off of her loop to go to William to engage him in this park. Because, once again, like I said, because the guests come back because of details, they notice that they notice something no one else noticed before, or there's something they fall in love with. I feel like they sent Dolores to William because he's not just going to go and sleep with the prostitutes. That's not who he is. They want to immerse him in this world as much as possible. We know this guy is rich. He has to have fun. And they feel like Dolores would make him have an attachment to this world. I am so tired. Now I feel like I can get into the show. The first 2 episodes were good, but they weren't enough to make me stay. I feel like now I can stay. The final scene with the flipping back between the timelines, I feel like that's what was happening. And the backstory with Bernard, I feel like those are enough to, they got me. Now I want to see what happens. What is up with the flies? I'm probably way off on that, but Dolores in the first episode we see the fly flying all over her, so maybe she hadn't been cleaned, and then she smacks the fly, so she hurt a living thing. I feel like the flies are like little bug hints in here. I probably sound like a raving maniac to y'all, but that's it. Alright, I'm gonna get off of here and maybe eat something, and I will see you guys in a while. Have a good weekend whenever I'm putting this up, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm sure that'll be a Game of Thrones one. Bye.